Ayana, my heart goes out to you and your family. And I just was watching Kalindi's Breaking Convention talk, which I've seen before. And oh my gosh, what a personality, what a character, what a a courageous soul, to push the envelopes as much as he did, and truly a leader in our times. We'll never forget him. So I'm so thankful that you're honoring him. During these challenging times. And, Kalindi and I met a few times. He was very patient. I would be at different conventions and things, and this character would be standing in the background. And I'd look at him and he'd look at me, and we just kind of had this electricity between our eyes. And we just nodded and waited. And then he came up, and we have a mutual background in the martial arts. I had martial arts schools for about 30 years. I got 2 black belts, and, Kalindi, I thought, I'm not sure if I could take this guy. I could take a lot of people, but not him. But nevertheless, he was a gentle, powerful, peaceful warrior. And that's what I really admired about him, to have strength and courage, and to wield it very, very carefully. So, as we like to say, he had gravitas. When he spoke, you listened, and you knew that he had a deep sincerity of conviction. So I very much am proud to have said I knew him, albeit very, very briefly. But it's like a soul that you meet in your life, that you've known this person for a very long time, maybe throughout the ages, beyond your own lifetime. It's a sort of a multi-generational, multi-dimensional connection that's just hard to put into words. So Kalindi's use of macrodoses, and much of the research I'm doing now, I'm up at this conference called TED, whatever. So I'm giving a talk on my psilocybin research. But what we have been seeing now, epigenetically, and what I mean by that is, as you take psilocybin, you stimulate genomic expressions. So your body responds. But not only neuroreceptors are activated, but we have really strong evidence now of neurogeneration. And the neurogeneration occurs via the vagus nerve from your stomach all the way to your brain. And it stimulates these compounds called BDNFs, brain-derived neurotropic factors. And this is something, unfortunately, new news for everyone. As we get older, we suffer from neurodegeneration. So dementia, unfortunately, other diseases, like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. And when we have traumatic brain injury, from the martial arts, from being hit, from falling, from bombs exploding, whatever, these TBIs also create neuroinflammation. Your brain swells, and that neuroinflammation is extremely damaging to your nerves. So looking at ways of being able to generate new nerves, and this is where Kalindi was really way ahead of his time, because there's really no LD50 lethal dose for 50% of a person, an animal will die from the drug. These are some of the least toxic drugs ever known. In fact, the one report on LD50s from 1958, I think from Sandoz Laboratories, was about 28 grams of pure psilocybin. This is like a really, really huge amount. Psilocybin is about 1% content. Sometimes, I know in Oakland, there's more potent strains up to 2%, but generally speaking, about 1%. So 100 times, 28 grams, that'd be 2,800 grams of mushrooms. And even in that one case of the LD50 determination, only 1 rat died. It could have died for other reasons. So it was not, it wasn't a very clear experiment. The point being is that these compounds are so friendly to our nervous system, and they dock with receptors. And now we know when they dock with the receptors, they're stimulating the growth of new nerves. And the exciting thing about BDNFs, the brain-derived nerve growth factors, is they can differentiate stem cells into new neurons. So I'm really excited about all sorts of different applications. We could do high doses, the Kilindi dose of, for instance, stem cells with extracts of psilocybin mushrooms, to be able to grow stem cells that differentiate into neurons for transplants into paraplegic, people who've had their spines or spinal cord severed, people who've lost the ability to walk. The potential of using psilocybin now for stem cell differentiation, where you could actually grow and start these nerves to grow in vitro in laboratory in a petri dish and then transplant them, I think has a lot of potential. So we are really extraordinarily excited about the wide range, and we're activating. We've seen now, I mean, my team, we've been working on this for several years now. I've spent well over $1 million of my own money on this research, and we're finding 6 different types of receptors that are being activated. So it's not just a one-shot wonder. It's a whole peripheral and central nervous system excitation and growing up new nerves. So this is a really extraordinary time. And Madhu, thank you very much for your talk. I very much relate to this water metaphor because I feel very much liquid when I journey, and I feel a direct connection to water and the fluidity of the experience. I've always described it as a sort of a liquid experience, and understanding how these compounds, have been used. There's over 218 psilocybin active mushroom species thus far discovered. Think of that, 218. And Psilocybin cubensis, of course, as Kalindi and others have noted, it's massive. So our ancestors walking the plains of Africa, you couldn't help but notice these things. They're just like light bulbs. And of course, you're hungry, you want to share it with your family, your friends, and most primates eat grub, insect larvae. So mushrooms are great reservoirs of that. And we are hunting, animals, you're looking for scat, and out of the scat comes these mushrooms. So invariably, we would have discovered these. So it's really is extraordinary, psilocybin mushrooms in general, because I think it's a bridge across continents, across cultures, and across generations. Psilocybin mushrooms make nicer people, make friendlier people, make more empathic people. And the meta studies that have been done, several 100,000 prisoners, when they found and they crunched the data, some of the researchers I know, I personally talked to them about this, they found if you've had one psilocybin psychedelic experience, there was a direct correlation with a reduction of violence, larceny, burglary, and other forms of theft and violent crime. So it's extraordinary. Now, association is not causation. That's what all this, scientists like to say, just to cover our butts, but it can be. And so I always thought if there was a dating app, it'd be nice to, say, have you tripped on mushrooms? Yes. Oh, okay, advance, and you go forward. But it really is true. There's a tremendous revolution across the world right now, a revolution from the underground of people rising up. And I think it speaks to your fundamental right to have a freedom to your consciousness. No government, no one should control your own consciousness. It is your fundamental human right. And this is a human rights issue. And so I'm 66 years of age, and I've been in psilocybin mushrooms since I was 15. But in 1971, when President Nixon, made psilocybin legal in the United Nations and soon followed, it really was an attempt to marginalize people who were expressing their civil rights. And so Nixon and his cronies targeted us, African Americans, gay people, hippies, the anti-war movement, the pro-environmental movement. We're all thrown in the same bucket because it was very convenient to say, okay, these people are using drugs and psychedelics and marijuana, et cetera. They were a common enemy of the state. In this case, the Nixon-dominated state. So it was a suppression of people's rights. Now we're seeing something very different. I've never thought when I spoke at TED in 2008, they warned me, don't you speak on psilocybin, Stamets. Now they're inviting me on front stage. I mean, times have changed. But there's a tremendous yearning of the heart now, and people who have been deeply affected by psilocybin feel there's an urgent duty and obligation, a need to share the ripples of kindness and the lessons that come from psilocybin. And as much trauma there has been, and this psilocybin high doses are very effective at resolving trauma. But my son has had some very big issues and has spent time in prison and is going back to prison, I'm sorry to say. So seeing this on both sides, you know, of, I think a lot of people can relate to this, is that he was defending a woman who was being beat up, and he pulled a baseball bat and then took care of the guy, but the cops showed up, he had the bat. So, you know, he got convicted. But then seeing what happens after conviction, where then you're just targeted by law enforcement, you're constantly targeted. And then no wonder he gets angry and upset, because, and it's terrible for the victim, absolutely. And it's terrible then for my son and my family and other people who've been in this situation, because then you're categorized and you're unfairly then accused of things that you had not done. You know, you're stereotyped. And this is really a huge problem, because then the people feel like there's no justice, you know? So this is something I think that people don't want to talk about, the fact that their son or their family member committed a crime. I mean, it's just too painful. But the difference with psilocybin is that when people take psilocybin and they resolve these traumatic experiences, they no longer are involved in this hate game and this dialectic, that their hearts open up and they feel this magnanimity of forgiveness and wanting to turn their life around and share the good news. Well, like pebbles that are being thrown into a pond, it's a ripple of goodwill. And I think it not only helps your family, but it helps your neighbors, it helps your neighborhood, it helps your city, it helps your state, it helps your country, the world. And so people want to spread good news, especially in these times. And I think this is what psilocybin is really bringing. It's a medicine for the people. I think it will reduce crime. I think it will make us smarter. And our leaders certainly need a lot more intelligence than they've been displaying. You know, we are in a very severe climate crisis. We need to have new leaders that rise up, understanding the commonality of that we all share, living in ecosystems that sustain us, because these ecosystems, you know, have our common interests. And it's the biodiversity of ecosystems, and all the studying I've been doing all these years, the strength of an ecosystem is in its biodiversity. The more the ecosystem is biodiverse, the more skill sets each individual has. So if there's challenges that occur, there's an individual in your ecosystem that has those skill sets that can okay, I have the tools, I have the ways of being able to remedy this. This is why the mycelium, with its network-like design, can have literally trillions of endpoints in a 3 feet wide mat of mycelium. Well, at the tips of this mycelium, there are multinucleate. There's lots of nuclei. And if they experience a new toxin, a new challenge, something that's adverse to the community, for instance, if they can produce a new enzyme and proteins that can break down the toxin or come up with a new strategy for survival, what happens is that information genomically spreads throughout the mycelium. So one point of contact can then inform the entire community. So this network-like design of the mycelium is more than just a metaphor. It's a lesson for us all of how I think we should work together and share our experiences. And we need outliers. We need courageous Kalindis who are pushing the envelope. And of course, there'll be a lot of people pushing the envelope that are going to fail. But this is the price, I think, of evolving. We have to be able to find new solutions by not accepting the status quo. And I adopted as a mantra a long time ago, and I have, as I get older, a few more caveats, but always question authority. Always question authority, and authority, and question it with respect, kindness. A little bit of humor helps. But once someone shuts you down and shuts your voice down because they feel threatened by what you're saying, then that should be a good reason for you to explore the subject even further and validate what you're being told, and add to the conversation. And one of the things I'd like to say to people I disagree with is, you've made some really interesting points. Many of them I agree with, some of them I don't. And then I like to build upon things I agree with. Okay, that always is nice. You always want to say something nice. And then that sets them up psychologically for hearing you now about the points you disagree with. It's the art of languaging and the art of communication. And that's what I think psilocybin has taught me personally, and is now teaching the whole world community, is that we need to ascend to a higher level. And I believe it is time critical for humans to evolve into a new species. And we are not the Homo habilis and erectus and the Homo sapiens, of the past 200,000 years. It's time for us to really, reinvent ourselves as humans that have greater empathy, respect, and acknowledge that our differences are really what gives us our greatest strengths. So I'm deeply saddened by Kilindi's, passing, but I'm not saddened by his passing of knowledge. He really set the stage for us to push on forward. And so I want to thank all of you for inviting me. That's about all the time that I have. So thank you, Dave, and Ayana. Thank you, everybody, for letting me kind of cyber connect to you.
Thank you, Paul. That was beautiful. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you so much for everything you do. That was perfectly appropriate. Thank you so much.
All right. Keep the peace. All right. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.